We're just about to start the live streaming, Carolyn.
Would you like to switch your camera off, Councillor
Yes,
Robbins?
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Council's meeting on the 23rd of February 2021. My name is Councillor Bill Lewis, Mayor of Rugby, and I am the chairman of this meeting. This meeting is being web streamed to the public and is being attended by members of the Council through Microsoft Teams. Before we begin working through the agenda, I'll go through some of the rules and procedure. The web streaming of this meeting is being monitored by IT services. If at any point there are any streaming issues, then I will be informed and the meeting will be adjourned till such time that the technical issues can be resolved. If during the course of the meeting any member is having connection issues, then there will be a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the connection issues can be resolved. If following the adjournment the connection issues cannot be resolved, then providing the meeting remains quorate, it will continue. It will be deemed that the member with connection issues has left the meeting and will no longer be able to participate. For all attendees, if you have not already done so, please will you switch off your microphones and cameras now. For members, your microphones and cameras should be switched off unless you are speaking. If you wish to speak during the meeting, please remember to raise your hand first and wait for me to ask you to speak. For voting during the meeting, please use the raise hand function. The Democratic Services Officer will confirm the vote. Are there any questions before we move into the formal agenda? I will now ask our Democratic Services Officer to confirm the attendees at this meeting. This will be for council members only. When your name is called, please confirm your attendance verbally by saying present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Mrs. Alanak.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Abarrow.
Present.
Councillor Byrne.
Present.
Councillor Brader.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Bragg.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Brown.
Present.
Councillor Kieran Brown.
Present.
Councillor Butlin.
Present.
Councillor Cade.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Crane.
Present.
Councillor Cranham.
Present.
Councillor Douglas.
Present.
Councillor Miss Dumbleton.
Present.
Councillor Eccleston.
Present.
Councillor Ellis.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Garcia.
Present.
Councillor Gillias.
Present.
Councillor Keeling.
Present.
Councillor Miss Lawrence.
Present.
Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Lowe.
Present.
Councillor Mahoney.
Present.
Councillor McQueen.
Present.
Councillor Mistry.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. New.
Councillor New is running late. I've had a message, so she may be arriving in the meeting. I'm not sure what the procedure is, but that's what's happening.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. O'Rourke.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Present.
Councillor Picker.
Present.
Councillor Poole.
Present.
Councillor Ms. Robbins.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Roberts.
Present.
Councillor Howard Roberts.
Present.
Councillor Jerry Roodhouse.
Present.
Councillor Mrs Roodhouse.
Present.
Councillor Sanderson.
Present.
Councillor Shearer.
Present.
Councillor Mrs Simpson Vince.
Present.
Councillor Srivastava. I'll come back to Councillor Srivastava because he's listed in the list of participants. Councillor Stokes.
Present. Sorry, present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stokes. And Councillor Mrs Timms.
Present.
Thank you. So at the moment, Mr Mayor, with Councillor New not in the meeting, that's 38 councillors present.
38. Thank you very much.
Mr Mayor, just to clarify in terms of procedure and process, if Councillor New does attend the meeting late, she will just need to make known that she is in attendance, and with your permission, she'll be able to participate within the meeting.
Is that would you be able to participate on voting on items that you'd only heard part of the discussion?
She will need to be within the meeting at the start of the discussion of that particular item. She wouldn't be able to vote if she joined partway through the debate.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move into the formal agenda. Item 1, the agenda is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies, Executive Director?
Mr Mayor, I have apologies for absence from councillors Lee Hunt and Pacey Day.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, to approve the minutes of the special meeting of Council held on the 2nd of February 2021. I move that the minutes of the special meeting of Council held on the 2nd of February 2021 be approved and adopted. Who will second the motion?
I will, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Those in favour, please show using the raise hand function.
That's
I must admit
35.
the problem. My raised hand function doesn't seem to be up on the screen.
Mr Mayor, if I may, I believe the icon has changed. It now looks like a smiling face with a smaller hand next to it. If you click on that one.
I don't have there's this floor of the menu. Isn't on the screen at all, I'm afraid. Well,
Mr Mayor, can I suggest that we take your vote as a verbal vote?
yeah, I'll take it verbally.
So that's 36 for, Mr Mayor.
Okay, those against, please show using the raised hand. Sorry, take your hands down first. And then those against, please show using the raised hand function.
So there's none against, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I think I've sorted out the problem with the menu now, so it should be okay from now on. So we're too short. So Do we have any abstentions? If you have, could you raise your hand, please?
There are no abstentions, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, in that case, the motion is carried. We move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Can I remind members that when they declare interests, they must also declare the general nature of that interest. Are there any declarations under non-pecuniary interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for councillors? Please show using the raise hand function.
There are no hands raised,
No.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item 3B, pecuniary interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for councillors.
Again, Mr. Mayor, no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. And C, notice under Section 106, Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax.
No hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Oh, really? Okay. Ah, it's back again. Thank you very much. Hadn't noticed that. I will continue with the meeting then, if that's okay with everyone else. And we go on to item 4, which is Mayor's announcements. And I've got 2 items under this heading tonight. The first one is with great sadness that we learned over the weekend that one of our colleagues had passed away. Keith Appleton worked for Rugby Borough Council for 39 years and was a valued member of the revenues team. We will miss him greatly. Our thoughts are with his wife and his daughter, his colleagues, and wider friends and family at this time. Please join me in a few moments of silence in memory of Keith. Thank you. Second item is a COVID update. With the government's publication of the roadmap to the end of the restrictions, there's renewed hope that the pandemic will finally be over later this year. I know that all of our residents and businesses are looking forward to a time when we can meet each other and support our shops, pubs and restaurants again. The promise of normality depends on beating the COVID-19 virus. Part of that is making sure that we all take up the offer of a vaccine when it is our turn. But for now, case numbers are still too high. We must continue to take great care to wash our hands, keep our distance from one another, and wear a mask. Soon we'll be able to live life normally again, but we must remain patient and keep going until that time comes. Thank you. So we move on to item 5, questions pursuant to Standing Order 10. Are there any questions, Executive Director?
Mr. Mayor, we have 2 questions this evening, and the first question will appear on the screen now. We have
Thank
a
you.
question from Councillor Douglas to Councillor Mrs. Crane.
I'd just like to thank Councillor Douglas for his question, and I don't plan to read it out because it's on
No,
the
that's
screen.
fine.
Thank you.
It's fine. Do you have a supplementary question? Councillor Dowdy.
Good evening. Yes, just briefly to say thank Councillor Crane for the detailed response. I'm very pleased that the council will be supporting Young Carers Action Day next month, and also like to place on record my thanks to all young carers in the borough. I was well briefed by the Mayor about the visit last year and the activity packs, and I'm sure the portfolio holder can confirm that these partnerships will grow and we will continue to support young carers in the weeks, months and years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Crane?
Yeah, just to say thank you, and yes, very happy to confirm that this is a fantastic cause, and we wholly encourage continued partnership working on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the second question will now appear on the screen.
So, Councillor Douglas, do you have a supplementary?
I've just gone on.
Good evening. Yes. Yes, yes, I do.
Excellent.
I thank the portfolio holder for the response. A little brief in detail, and it would be good to know the indicative figure as well as number of reported incidents. Residents in Paddocks Ward, my area, have seen increased graffiti on private and public property in the last 12 months, and I know other councillors have also seen increased graffiti around the borough. To look into this matter in more detail, will the portfolio holder commit to setting up a task group with me and others to see what we can do to tackle the issue and provide support and advice to residents and businesses? Thank you.
We'll certainly look into that. We're currently working on the fly tipping working group, and hopefully that'll include graffiti as well at some point. But we will talk outside this meeting about it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we move on to item 6A, which is to receive the report of Cabinet dated the 4th of January 2021. In submitting the report of Cabinet, I shall call upon the paragraph number and heading. If members wish to raise questions or to comment, will they please indicate they wish to do so using the raise hand function when I call the item. Report of Cabinet, 4th of January 2021. Councillor Lowe, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 1 of the report of Cabinet of the 4th of January 2021?
Mr. Mayor, I so move and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Paragraph 1, Corporate Strategy 2021 to 2024. Councillor Lowe, do you wish to speak now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief, as I know we have a lot to get through on our agenda tonight, and I will also switch on my camera. I would want members to take brevity as a sign that I'm not attaching any importance to this issue. However, the corporate strategy of any organisation sets out its mission and its purpose, and this document is no different. From the start of the process of devising this strategy, we set down as a cabinet 2 very clear rules. And the first was that the strategy should be a direct and full response to what we understand the public wants from us. The old corporate strategy, which is now expired, was fit for its time. However, these are different times with different challenges. And from the discussions that we've had with the public, they've given us a very clear sense of what they think our priorities should be. As members will be aware, we recently conducted a wide-ranging resident survey in order to establish what the residents of Rugby believe the council should be focusing on. and these views have been collated and incorporated into this document. The second of the two ground rules was that the document itself should be brief, clear and easily accessible. We want each and every resident of Rugby to be able to find, read and understand our strategy with ease. And that's because we want them to know what we're aspiring to do. And furthermore, Mr. Mayor, they are more than entitled to know and understand what this council is trying to do with their money on their behalf. This level of transparency and accountability is absolutely integral to democracy. We're here to serve the public, we spend their money to do so, and it's therefore absolutely vital that our stated mission in how we propose to do so is clearly understandable. All too often, documents of this sort are unwieldy and replete with jargons and acronyms, and we've deliberately avoided this here. We've done our utmost to ensure that we've expressed ourselves in clear, plain and straightforward language, and with that in mind, we are very happy to accept the proposed minor changes to the wording of the strategy suggested by Councillor Roodhouse. In brief, to address the strategy itself, there's no doubt that climate change and the way in which we choose to respond to this challenge is one of the defining issues of our time, and it's very clear from the way in which residents responded to our survey. Great many of them feel the same. As members will be aware, we've set out some ambitious climate change targets and currently have a cross-party working group dedicated to looking at how these targets will be achieved. Both morally and practically, there can be no doubt this is the right thing to do, and I'm proud to place this issue front and centre of the Council's agenda. Next, we speak around the economy. And once again, it is absolutely vital that we ensure that the Borough of Rugby has a thriving and forward-looking economy and is well positioned to respond to the broader economic outlook and future opportunities. This is closely linked to the work which has been going on in terms of our town centre strategy. We also need to ensure that the Borough of Rugby is positioned as being open for business and that this council actively pursues and promotes policies which ensure the future economic growth and prosperity of our community. Thirdly, we address health and communities. It is absolutely vital that the council continues its good work in promoting diversity and inclusiveness and ensuring that all of our residents feel welcome and valued regardless of their backgrounds. It's incumbent on us as a council to ensure that the leisure facilities for residents to lead full and active lives are here, and above all to ensure that our residents feel safe. Finally, I'd also like to note this section of the strategy addresses homelessness and would like to highlight the continued good work this council and its partners have been doing to address this issue. And finally, Mr. Mayor, underpinning all of this is the organisation itself. Simply put, these are ambitious and lofty goals, and I make no apology for that. But we will not be able to deliver these or any other goals unless we have an organisation that is fit for purpose. We've already begun to embark on a radical programme of transformative change for this council, which began with the restructure of our senior leadership team a few weeks ago. Members can expect to see more organisational and structural changes as we look to adapt this organisation to the future, and I look forward to working with members of all parties and with our officers to further deliver an organisation which is right for the future that we face.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. I see that with two hands up, and Councillor Roodhouse's hand was up first. So would you like to speak, Councillor Roodhouse?
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. Apologies, Councillor Roodhouse. I'd just like to come in at this point to confirm that Councillor New is actually in attendance on the call and she was here at the start of this item.
I thank you very much for that information. Apologies,
Councillor Roodhouse.
That's right, no problem. Understand that we have to get through these things. I'm proposing the amendment, Mr. Mayor, which I think has been previously circulated and sent round.
That's on the screen.
Yep, that's it. Thank you very much. So we're moving this forward.
Councillor Roodhouse, you've muted. Apologies.
That's all right, no worries. It's the word of the year. Yeah, so I'm moving the proposed amendment, and I believe the leader is happy to accept what we've proposed. And in so doing, I just wanted to touch upon a couple of the reasons why. The one on climate is it would be very nice for Rugby Borough as a whole, spreading all the way across to be zero emissions by 2030, but I think that might be potentially quite difficult, and therefore the group believes that I think What it was being talked about is the council as an organisation to be net zero, and that gives actually greater clarity around that and a clear target to get to. Separate to that is we have great control over our council housing stock, and when we recently the rents were set and it was discussed in that debate of actually we think we can go quicker and accelerate the carbon footprint in reducing that by 2027. On the economy, we believe that it should be opportunities for all, regardless of disabilities or any other particular hindrances, so it should be all residents. And the last one on health and communities, as we all know, coming through this pandemic and on, mental health and the well-being of residents is going to be absolutely vital. The health inequality gap has widened, and we believe that within the corporate strategy that we should be actually targeting this area along with extra support for families and young people going forward, which would actually give also greater clarity and purpose around those particular investment streams, because as the councillor was right that the corporate strategy sets the direction and the tone of the local authority, and the words that are set down here are quite important because they're the words which will be checking against performance plans, action plans and delivery of doing that. And I'm glad that you've accepted them because I think it makes it for a much better document, so we'll be supporting it.
Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Councillor Rourke, do you wish to speak?
Yes, broadly speaking, this is a well-written document. It's pretty clear in terms of setting out the sort of corporate direction. We have no problem with the amendments. However, I mean, I would like to say that the challenge for all of us is the fact that we're right in the middle of a pandemic, and it really has exposed and amplified the underlying inequalities in our local communities. Many people are now using food banks, more people are unable to pay their bills, and child poverty is running at an all-time high. Increasing homelessness, which will clearly obviously get worse as the furlough schemes finish, and people living in overcrowded accommodation and often earning low wages. We've seen this particularly in some of the infection rates across the area. Without me going into detail there, it definitely has brought out and highlighted those health inequalities. So it's really important for me, you know, it underpins everything we should be about as a council, is how we are tackling the social causes of health inequalities. And as I say, it's even more urgent now. So for us, reducing health as a group, reducing health inequalities has to be an absolute priority for this authority to give us the best possible chance of avoiding the unintended consequences falling disproportionately on the most disadvantaged people in our communities. So in summary, we believe there needs to be a far greater emphasis on how we fund and address those health inequalities in our sort of most disadvantaged communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? There's no hands up. So I'll go to the vote. I submit the confirmation adoption of the whole of the report, subject to the amendments made thereon. Those in favour, please show using the raised hand function, and keep your hands up until I ask you to lower them, please.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarity in terms of process. So this is an amendment, so there will be two votes, firstly on the amendment and then thereafter the substantive motion, and a second vote would need to be undertaken.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, if we ask councillors to take their hands back down and we bring the amendment up on the screen, and then we have clarity over the vote. Thank you.
Okay, well, will you all please lower your hands? Start again, voting on the amendment. All in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. In that case, that is carried. We then move to vote on the substantive motion, which is the original plus the amendment. Those in favour, please raise your hands.
That's 37 for, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Will you please lower your hands? Still some hands raised. Right. Will those against please raise your hands?
There are none against, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In that case, are there any abstentions?
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, in which case the motion is carried. I'll move on to item 6B. To receive the report of Cabinet dated the 1st of February 2021. In submitting the report of Cabinet, I shall call each paragraph number and heading. If members wish to raise questions or to comment, will they please do so when I call the relevant item. I will be calling the paragraph according to the portfolios under which they fall. Report of Cabinet 2nd of February 2021. Councillor Ms Robbins, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 1 of the report of Cabinet of the 2nd of February 2021?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I so move.
Thank you. Paragraph 1, Finance and Performance Monitoring 2020-2021, Quarter 3. Councillor Ms Robbins, would you like to speak?
Not unless anyone has any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Are there any other speakers? There's no hands up. I presume there aren't. And in that case, Councillor Robbins, am I right in saying that you don't wish to say anything?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right. And we move on to next item with Councillor Mrs Crane. Will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 2 of the report of Cabinet of the 2nd of February 2021?
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Thank you. Paragraph 2, Preventing Homelessness in Warwickshire, a multi-agency approach. Councillor Mrs Crane, would you like to speak at this stage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to speak in detail, but I just want to welcome this report and say that it's an excellent report adopting a county-wide homelessness strategy and the plans that need to be put in place to take that forward. And just to say, thank you to the officers for all the work they've done on this, and it's a really good report that I hope will benefit residents in Rugby and help to prevent homelessness.
Thank you. Are there any speakers? Councillor Roothouse, you have your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a report, really, a strategy that's been a long time coming and in development, and I'd like to congratulate Raj and the officers, as the portfolio holders said, for the work that's been done, and also the work that's been done in pulling the Warwickshire officers, housing officers together on this. It's an extremely important issue. And it will be more important going forward. And, I do think there's some quite good action points, but there's still some way to go on this. Namely, one is around homeless people with GPs. We still have GPs who are not signing up homeless people. And, there are questions about vaccinations as well at the same time. So I welcome the report. I think it's a good starting point, but we do need to follow through with the action and the activities that have been listed. And I look forward to some of the results and following those through, along with trying to introduce some new methods of crowdfunding for getting homeless people back into the employment ladder.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crane, do you wish to say anything further?
I don't wish to say anything further at this point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. There are no more hands up, so I will now submit for confirmation adoption the whole of the report. Those in favour, please show using the raise hand function.
That's 36. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that's 37 for.
37. So we're still one short, are we?
No, Mr. Mayor, we're two short now because Councillor New joined the meeting. Yes, we're at 39 now.
Right. Well, in that case, please put your hands down. And I'll go on to ask for those against, please show using the raise hands function.
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so are there any abstentions, please?
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. In that case, the motion is carried. We move on to the next item, which is C, item C, to receive the report of Audit and Ethics Committee dated the 26th of January 2021. Councillor Lowe, will you move the confirmation adoption of item 1 of the report of Audit and Ethics Committee of the 26th of January 2021?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Thank you. Paragraph 1, Treasury Management Strategy incorporating the annual investment strategy. Would you like to speak on that now, Councillor Lowe?
Only to say, Mr. Mayor, that I'd like to thank the officers involved in the production of this report and that I would move the report as written.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor McQueen, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to start off by thanking the officers for the report. It is extremely good and very detailed. I am disappointed, however, that there's no mention of environmental, social or government consideration within the Treasury Management Report or within our investment portfolio. The industry standard on this now is the UN's Principles of Responsible Investing, which take into account environmental, social and government issues. We're now seeing the majority of large investment houses and asset managers regularly publish details of their carbon footprint, and they're regularly rated by the MSCI under their ESG index. We're also seeing a surge in asset managers encouraging good governance practices within businesses around the world. Many councils now, including Warwickshire County Council, have taken steps in this direction, citing ESG issues in their treasury management policies. Many other councils are also insisting any counterparty are signatories under the UNPRI. This has both macroeconomic benefits, encouraging a more sustainable economy long term, but also microeconomic benefits in the forms of returns, which are extremely encouraging. As custodians of public funds, I believe we do have a responsibility to consider the environmental, social and government issues raised by our treasury management practice. I also feel that unless we do that, we're never going to hit our targets under the climate emergency that was declared last year. It is incredibly important that the climate emergency start being implemented in every single part of our business practice as a council. I think it would help us in taking a large step towards meeting the climate emergency targets if we were to take those environmental, social and government issues into account when putting towards our treasury management and investment strategies. In recent research shows the way investments are made can be 27% more impactful than people flying less, eating less red meat and driving less. So it can have huge impact on the way we live and the way we interact with our environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McQueen. Are there any other speakers? Now, Councillor Lowe, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd also like to thank Councillor McQueen for raising what I think is a really excellent point. As it happens, we have already been looking at our ESG strategy because Councillor McQueen is absolutely right. It is the sort of thing that we ought to take into consideration around this matter. And I'm happy to ask the Audit and Ethics Committee themselves to look at this more formally.
Thank you. I know the speakers, so I'll now submit for confirmation adoption the whole of the report. Those in favour, please show using the raised hand function. Councillor Shearer, you have your camera on. Could you possibly switch it off, please?
That's 38 for Mr. Mayor.
38. Okay. Please lower your hands. Thank you. Those against, please show using the raise hand function.
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Are there any abstentions?
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In that case, the motion is carried. And we move on to item 7, to receive and consider the reports of officers. The next item is to receive the report of the Chief Financial Officer, set out at item 7A of the agenda, which has been circulated to all members of the council. The report concerns the council's tax determination for 2021-2022. The final proposed resolution, including all figures, has been circulated to all members and has been published on the council's website. Members are reminded that the requirement in the council's constitution that no councillor may speak for more than 5 minutes does not apply when council considers the annual budget. However, I ask all councillors to keep their contributions to the point and not to repeat the comments of previous speakers unnecessarily. If I consider that any speech is unduly long or repetitive, I will ask that councillor to close their speech. The report of the Chief Financial Officer sets out a core council tax resolution. Councillor Lowe, will you, as leader of the council, move the report of the council finance officers concerning the council tax determination for 2021-2022?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Thank you. Who will second the motion?
I will, Mr. Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Would you like to present the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so I will be brief despite the more generous timing allowance on matters like this. So I appear before members tonight in a sombre but resolute mood to move our annual council tax determination report. As members and the public will be aware, due to the financial impact of the ongoing pandemic, we and every other authority have faced some significant unexpected pressure. I'm very grateful to our officers for the work they have undertaken in compiling this report, but more importantly, would like to place on record my thanks to our Acting Chief Financial Officer, John Illingworth, to his predecessor, Manny Ketley, and to the portfolio holder, Councillor Robbins, for the sterling work they have undertaken in managing this council's finances with prudence and with care in earlier years to ensure that we are able to approach our current predicament from a position of far greater strength than many other authorities around the country. So politicians are often accused of lacking clarity and straightforwardness in some of their public statements. However, I believe it's important to speak very clearly and have an honest conversation with members and with residents, particularly on a matter so fundamental as finance. Self-evidently, we're not in the financial position we would have hoped to be. This year, we will receive no core grant funding from central government following the gradual removal of the revenue support grants, and we are projected to receive £800,000 less in retained business rates and new homes bonus funding than in the previous year. We will still receive £168,000 in the form of the new lower tier services grant, but there will nonetheless be some difficult decisions to make. The proposed council tax increase of £5 per head per year for a Band D property, £5 per year, I should say, Mr. Mayor, will provide an additional income to this council of £235,000. Savings and new income sources will cover a further £760,000 of the budgeted shortfall. However, it will be necessary to move £734,000 from our reserves as a one-off movement in order to ensure that we deliver a balanced budget. It is traditional at the time of the annual budget setting for each of the political groups to move a resolution announcing a suite of additional discretionary spending. This year, the Conservative group has chosen not to do this. Given the financial position that we find ourselves in and in the spirit of the financial prudence, which has been one of the hallmarks of the way we have run this council for many years, it would not be right to announce a raft of additional spending this year. And I also note, Mr. Mayor, that the other parties have taken the same decision, and for that I commend them. The current pandemic has seen our community pull together, and it is heartening to see all councillors in this chamber put their differences aside to do the right thing for Rugby. Clearly, Mr. Mayor, it is not sustainable for us to rely on our reserves in order to support our finances on a long-term basis. And to this end, I'm delighted to report that we've been working with officers on the development of a number of commercial initiatives which will bolster this council's financial position. 2 such initiatives will be before us at the next Cabinet meeting on Monday of next week. So, Mr. Mayor, to conclude, I move this budget report as written. It is a balanced budget which will enable us to deliver our services over the coming year whilst protecting our financial position. I would, however, like to reiterate that we are on the cusp of a period of significant change for both this council and this borough, and that the transformation which is now underway in terms of what this authority does, how it does it, and most importantly, how it pays for it, will lay the foundations for a bright and prosperous future as we emerge from the pandemic.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. I see there are 2 hands up to speak. Councillor O'Rourke, would you like to speak first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, can I just place on record our thanks as well, the Labour Group thanks to all the hard work that the officers have put in, the whole of the senior management team. It is a very clear and detailed report. This has clearly been a very difficult year for the people of Rugby, and our people have been asked to make lots of sacrifice, and without doubt the majority have followed the rules that we've asked them to follow in terms of the pandemic. So I want to go on record as well in terms of saying thank you to the people of Rugby. Thank you for doing that, because obviously it's really important that we get out of this pandemic as soon as we can. I'd also like to say I'd like to put my thanks on record to all the officers and all of the staff of this authority for their hard work throughout this pandemic, which has often gone beyond the call of duty. We heard the other week about how our sort of refuge collectors took it upon themselves to clear a road of ice all the way through to the vaccination centre. You know, not asked to do this, just off their own bat. And I think it's important that we recognise and celebrate this pulling together of the local community and the workforce. There are also many examples of staff working shoulder to shoulder, our staff working shoulder to shoulder with their local people and volunteers to protect and support the most vulnerable in our community. We'd like to say thank you to them as well for all that they have done. It is really appreciated. The council officers have stepped up to play their role in supporting the national effort to tackle the COVID virus. I believe they've acted as the 4th emergency service and locally prioritising the most vulnerable in our community to ensure they have the support that they need. We all know in this chamber that a large percentage of the additional cost incurred by this council over the last 12 months is a direct result of the pandemic, and it comes on top of the government's austerity programme, which has lasted for more than 10 years now. The borough is facing one of the toughest financial climates in living memory. Its future hangs in the balance. We are being starved out, forced down the unitary authority road that this government so clearly wants, moving away from local democracy. As a council, we are facing a range of very tough choices, including for the first time in my memory, having to use our reserves to meet the financial shortfalls in COVID funding and continuing reductions in the central government funding that Councillor Lowe's already mentioned. This is all made even worse by the one-year financial settlement and all the uncertainty that brings with it. This comes at a time when we all absolutely want to do the very best for the Rugby residents. We want to do everything we can to protect our communities. Ministers from this government promised that the government's financial package would provide councils with all the additional resources to deliver local services and continue to support their communities during the pandemic, whilst protecting the taxpayers from the excessive council tax rises. That's not happened, right? But we know now that the money isn't enough, and during a time when many Rugby residents are struggling to survive, we're expecting them to pay a lot more. I know not all the rises are up to us in Rugby Borough Council. We've seen the County Council go up, the Precept go up, the police and crime, all of it, you know. Local authorities like Rugby have worked really hard, and they've done a fantastic job. But without the appropriate funding, we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back. Despite our united local front throughout the pandemic, which Councillor Lowe very kindly mentioned earlier on, this government I believe, is seeking to divide and rule. The Chancellor's spending review combined a hesitance to raise national taxation with a willingness to let council tax rise by refusing to compensate councils for the full cost incurred from their COVID response. They have left the door open for council tax to increase by up to 5% across the board in many areas. This government knows it can avoid those tough decisions itself and lets our councils take the full public backlash for their lack and their failure to fund the COVID resources needed to fight this pandemic. We are very, very disappointed, and we do feel that we are in a situation now, if this continues on and we have the uncertainty in the future in terms of funding, that this council will no longer be sustainable. No matter how hard our officers work, and they do work hard, we're in a very, very tricky position. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor O'Rourke. Councillor Roothouse, you wish to speak?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I start also by placing on record my thanks to John Ellingworth, the finance team, but also, as Councillor O'Rourke has said, to the staff and people and everybody that's been involved with during the pandemic in the work that they've done. I think everybody from the voluntary sector all the way through, has done some really valuable community work and support work, and it's greatly valued. And I think it's only right that tonight we should place on record our thanks. Mr. Mayor, turning to the to tonight's budget, it is with a heavy heart, and I think Councillor Lowe's right, really, that it is a sombre budget. It's one of the hardest ones I've ever seen that's arrived at this council, and I've seen a few. But it is predicated, of course, on a one-year settlement from government towards local government, who always seem to get a kick in the teeth. It doesn't matter who's in charge down at Whitehall, but there always seems to be local government has to take the brunt of it. And a one-year settlement is just not good enough. And you just have to then look at the medium-term financial plan, which was presented in the Cabinet Papers around the impacts for 2022-23, where potentially this council is going to look at a deficit of 2.895 million across the 4 years. And that's before we get into the new homes bonus consultation that's now taking place, and how much longer that will be around, we don't know. Will the Chancellor next week on business rates and business rates retention, the rumours are circulating quite wildly that business rates will be changed and adapted, where local authorities will not be collecting at the amounts that they were used to help support services as well. And of course, the Chancellor has also made the assumptions that nobody will get a wage increase or a salary increase across the public sector. And one of the things which I've said before is that I think he lacks the understanding, actually, that for local government, there's a nationally recognised document and negotiation. And as can be seen in the Cabinet report that was presented, there's a 1% pay award, which is applied in each of the years. And it's if that ever got up to 2%, it would blow the medium-term financial plan and the assumptions in the documentation out of the water. So it is with a heavy heart that we will be voting for the budget tonight to go through, because we do need to get to some point of going forward. And I think working across the parties, the political boundaries, we do need to get some greater transparency, some greater workings around how we arrive and tackle the savings going forward. And that will require greater scrutiny of the work of the council. And I recognise what Councillor Lowe's talked about in some of the commercial activities and setting up companies to try and bolster this local authority going forward. But you only have to look down the road at Stratford District and at Warwick councils who are now creating a super district. The shadow of local government reform is sitting there ready and waiting. And you just have to look up the road at Nuneaton and North Warwickshire's finances and compare it to ours. and you know, we do have to bring that into bear over a medium term. Mr. Mayor, so I think I would agree that we all have to do the right thing tonight for Rugby and for its residents, and to keep the services that are going together. We do need to pull together, as has been said, and we do need to work across the political divide. I'm willing to do that, and I hope Councillor O'Rourke and Councillor Lowe are as well, in order to bring about sustained economic viability for Rugby Town and for the borough and for its residents going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Mrs. Brown, you had your hand up and then it went down again.
It did, yes. Sorry, I didn't want to duplicate what people had already said. But just very briefly, the pressures on budget obviously exacerbated by the COVID situation, but national government is such a serial underfunder of local government, you know, and we're taking all kinds of hits, aren't we, because of this this failure to sort of tax nationally at an appropriate level. I'm concerned about the pressure that's also being put on the third sector at the moment, because we're witnessing a breakdown in some of these voluntary services too, and I think it's a mistake to rely too heavily on people stepping up and picking up, mopping up what should be dealt with, paid for, and resourced from central government. I am extremely concerned about the financial situation, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. The next hand up is Councillor Robbins. Do you wish to speak now or wait until later on?
Sorry, I think Councillor Sanderson's hand went up before mine, Mr. Mayor.
Well, it's not there in the order on the list at the moment, but if you will give way to Councillor Sanderson, then I'll ask him to speak.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some concerns that where the money has come out, the allocated reserve for the town centre, really in terms of public safety. Much of the town centre and certainly the paving, the brickwork hasn't seen any action for quite a number of years, to the degree where it has become in some places dangerous. In fact, I'm aware of one incident where a lady ended up, she'd come to visit her grandchildren for the day, but ended up with a broken hip in Walsgrave. My concern is, are we going to cover those costs for those urgent or emergency repairs from this budget? Well, the officers are saying to me at the moment, they've got no budget to cover such a said scenario. Perhaps Councillor Robbins can help with that one.
Thank you. Councillor Robbins, you're top of the list at the moment.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm quite happy to speak now. Let me just put my hand down.
Thank you. Right.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've listened to what people have said, and I'm sure that Councillor Lowe will come back on a lot of the comments. Mr. Mayor, it has, without question, been an exceedingly difficult and unusual year. The effect on the council's finance is clear to see, and yet we present to council a balanced budget for 2021-22, albeit with some finance coming from balances. And I cannot stress enough the difficult times ahead. Had we not been prudent during the more affluent years and boosted our reserves, we would without a doubt be in a far more difficult position. I presented to Cabinet and Council over the last year the financial position at every stage, and I will continue to do the same over the next 12 months. It will be a long, hard road to recovery for the whole country, let alone Rugby Borough Council. But we are a strong council and we have a stable economy, and I am confident that we will come through these hard times. I hear what Councillor O'Rourke has to say, and yes, it does seem like gloom and doom, but This is another year. The pandemic hopefully is getting under control, and I am confident that we will perform well in the coming years. During the past year, we took the unusual step to have a series of workshops to look at the budget and the medium-term financial plan. These included cabinet members and officers and leaders of the opposition. It is my intention to continue in this way during 21-22. We need to work together, as Councillor Roodhouse has just said. These times are very strange, and we will come through them if we work together, and we will be stronger and we will be fitter. Mr. Mayor, the leader has outlined some of his vision for the future, and I know there are a lot of good things in the pipeline, and I'm fully behind all that he is hoping to achieve. This has always been an inclusive and decisive council, and I'm confident that we will continue to be so. Yeah, I am happy and, well, quite pleased actually that we have cross-party support tonight. The recommendation tonight is not what we would normally put forward. As has been said, we would normally put forward a growth programme from all sides, but that is just not possible at the moment. Mr. Mayor, I would like to draw the members' attention to the following paragraph. The council has just implemented a new corporate strategy. Outcome 4 of the strategy is Rugby Borough Council is a responsible, effective and efficient organisation. In order for this council to be responsible and efficient, we must set a robust, comprehensive and achievable budget, exploring all avenues of income to meet our financial targets. Undertake commercial activities in the open market where it is sustainable and responsible to do so. Treat taxpayers' money with respect and ensure that our high quality services demonstrate value for money. The medium-term financial plan has been established, taking this into consideration, and given the challenges that are faced in delivering the savings required over the next 4 years, it is critical that this is delivered. Mr. Mayor, it just remains for me to say thank you. Thank you to all the officers who have worked so hard over the last 12 months, and especially to John Illingworth. John, your reports are very clear and very easy to understand, and I am grateful for all you have done to produce those. You have led the financial team through these difficult times, and you have been of immeasurable help to me in preparing the cabinet and council meetings. So I thank you, John. That's all I have to say at this time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, you have your hand up. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you to all the officers as well, obviously, and to Councillor Robbins. I'd just like to say a few things. It's great that we've got efficiency in our organisation. Of course, we all celebrate that. And obviously, we all recognise the fact that you're legally obliged to run a balanced budget. I think that's true of any party who is in power. But I think the issue here, it really comes down to, it doesn't matter how much council tax that you put up. Effectively, what you're doing is you're in a shortfall due to underinvestment from central government. And that comes through when we start seeing things like £22 billion on a failed test and trace scenario. Why was that money, for example, not given down, you know, if local government matters, why was it not given to local government to implement those systems? Now, I'm sure we could have spent that money on a much more efficient system. It's not your fault, not blaming anybody in this room. But it does raise the question that if £22 billion is available for a failed app, which incidentally, I have some friends who could have produced that much cheaper. I just want to ask the excuse me, I haven't finished, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor,
at the beginning not to repeat.
Yes, I haven't, but I do think that you're interrupting, so my flow now has been ruined. So other people have managed to actually have a conversation, Mr. Mayor, but I haven't. So Mayor, I've just been muted. Please don't mute me. Thank you very much. So my main concern here really is that, we're seeing a £5 a year rise, but it isn't in isolation, as Councillor Brown said. So I was really coming to my conclusion at that point, but thank you for muting me. That was very impolite. And thank you for the interruption, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I didn't put myself on mute. Right. We've got a lot of extra speakers now. Councillor, do you wish to wait until the other people have spoken?
I will wait until the end, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Councillor Parker, you've raised your hand. No?
Sorry, technical issues. Can I just concur that I do feel it is very impolite to mute members? We all disagree with each other. Many of members will disagree with everything I say, breathe and utter. But we have a right in these forums to express our views. And I'm very uncomfortable elected members being silenced in this forum. And that is not allowed, that we allow to go unchallenged. Whether we agree or disagree, we have the right to say our piece and to have the allocated time allowed to us. There was no repetition in the previous speaker's comments. Thank you.
Councillor Lowe, I think that's the lot. So if you'd like to sum up, respond.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've received some very impassioned responses from councillors from all parties this evening. If I start briefly with Councillor O'Rourke, Councillor O'Rourke, you have quite correctly highlighted the excellent work that our officers have done throughout this pandemic. And interestingly, you've stolen my thunder slightly, because I was also going to reference the example of our refuse collectors clearing gritting the paths around the vaccination centres, which surely must go down in history as one of the finest examples of a community pulling together and of local government at its absolute best. They deserve to be commended wholeheartedly for that, as do all of our other officers who pulled together throughout this very difficult time that I'm pleased to say looks as though it may almost be at an end. More broadly addressing the substantive points of the debate, Councillor Brown, Councillor Roodhouse and Councillor O'Rourke all highlighted the uncertainty with respect to the central government finance position. I don't disagree that uncertainty is not desirable. However, I would like to highlight that it is as a result of the prudent way in which we in this council, and I can only speak for this council, have managed our finances over the past few years. We are in a position of having something of a cushion to get us through this difficult time. Councillor Sanderson, you mentioned the town centre. I would like to note that the £150,000 town centre funding remains in the budget, and I'm happy to have any discussion with you offline regarding how you think the way in which that's spent may need to change. Councillor Robbins, well, you very correctly highlighted a number of the things this council is already doing in order to improve the financial sustainability of our position. The fact of the matter is that it is only through commercial endeavours and through taking sensible investment decisions that make the best of our assets that we will achieve financial sustainability for the long term. And it is precisely those kind of decisions that we are looking at taking, we have been taking, and we will continue to take. And should members doubt my word on that, I refer you to the papers on blue for the next cabinet meeting. Finally, I'd like to turn to Councillor Ellis and Councillor Parker, who, and I mean this with the greatest of respect, provided us jointly with some good-humoured light relief at the end of the debate. First of all, Councillor Ellis, I've got to say I agree with Councillor Parker. It's not appropriate for a councillor to be muted. However, I would like to note that perhaps you could have modified your tone slightly in addressing the mayor. You know, he does, after all, hold an office that means he is entitled to all of our respect when speaking with him. But I do not believe it was the right thing to mute you. And Councillor Parker, what can I say? You are a woman of many surprises. Never in a million years did I think we would see you standing up so robustly and eloquently for Councillor Ellis. You are to be commended for your contribution to cross-party work. And that concludes everything I have to say, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted that we have cross-party support for this sober and serious budget that we moved tonight. But I am pleased to say that it would appear that we are all committed to doing what is right for our borough.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe.
Hear, hear.
Can you all switch your mics off if you're not actually speaking officially, please? Thank you. Right, we'll carry on. Please note that again, it is the government's expectation that at budget setting meetings, all councillors will adopt the practice of a recorded vote. Members will therefore be asked individually to indicate how they are voting on the proposal, and names will be recorded in the minutes. The Democratic Services team leader will read out the names of members present. Please indicate whether you are for or against the motion, or whether you wish to abstain from voting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So members are voting on the proposed final resolution that has been circulated to all members and published on the website, which has been moved by Councillor Lowe and seconded by Councillor Ms Robbins. So Councillor Mrs Alanak.
For.
Councillor Mrs Barrow.
For.
Councillor Byrne.
For.
Councillor Brader.
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs Bragg.
For.
Councillor Mrs Brown.
I'm abstaining.
Councillor Kieran Brown.
Abstain.
Councillor Butlin.
For.
Councillor Cade.
Jennifer.
Councillor Cade. Mr Mayor, I'll move on to the next councillor. I'll come back to Councillor Cade.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Crane.
For.
Councillor Cranham.
For.
Councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Miss Dumbleton.
For.
Councillor Eccleston. Councillor Eccleston. Again, Mr Mayor, I'll move on to the next councillor.
Oh, Councillor Eccleston has put his hand up on the...
Okay. Councillor Eccleston, are you able to confirm verbally if you're voting for, against or abstaining, please? For, thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Abstaining.
Councillor Mrs Garcia.
For.
Councillor Gillias.
For.
Councillor Keeling.
For.
Councillor Miss Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Lewis.
For.
Councillor Lowe.
For.
Councillor Mahoney.
Abstain.
Councillor McQueen.
For.
Councillor Mistry.
Abstaining.
Councillor New.
For.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Abstain.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Picker.
For.
Councillor Poole.
4.
Councillor Ms Robbins.
4.
Councillor Mrs Roberts.
4.
Councillor Howard Roberts.
4.
Councillor Jerry Roodhouse.
4.
Councillor Mrs Roodhouse.
4.
Councillor Sanderson.
4.
Councillor Shearer.
Yes.
Councillor Mrs Simpson Vince.
4.
Councillor Srivastava.
Abstain.
And Councillor Mrs Timms.
4.
And if we can just go back to Councillor Cade, please.
4. Can I say I'm abstain?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Shearer. Yes, I got that. Thank you. I'll just count those up, Mr. Mayor. Just bear with me.
Okay, thank you.
So that's 30 for the motion with 9 abstentions and none against, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that's the same figures as I've got, so thank you very much for that. In which case, the motion is carried. And we move on to the next item, which is item 8, notice of motion pursuant to Standing Order 11. Set out at item 8 of the agenda are 3 notices of motion. I consider it advisable and convenient to deal with the motion set out at agenda item 8A at this meeting. Councillor Mrs Brown, will you please move the motion set out in item 8A of the agenda, notice of which has been given under Standing Order 11.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to present this.
Sorry, who will second the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm privileged to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Mrs Brown, Councillor Mrs Brown, to speak to her motion.
Thank you. I'm so sorry to jump the gun. I'm just anxious to do this.
So
last April, the Chancellor quite rightly gave an additional £20 per week to universal credit recipients, as we know, to help them cope with the additional and severe, in some circumstances, pressures that COVID presented to them. And it's been quite literally a lifeline to many. Currently, this is due to be withdrawn in April 2021. And if that happens, 7,148 households in Rugby will be in danger of tipping into poverty. The Institute of Fiscal Studies estimates that nationally an additional 730,000 children will cross that poverty line if that £20 a week is withdrawn. Mr. Mayor, I'm asking this council to make strong representation to the Chancellor and the Prime Minister to keep that lifeline and make the £20 uplift permanent for universal credit recipients. The most recent report from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation into Poverty states that it's changing its face in Britain since the start of the COVID crisis, and people who have never made a claim in their lives are doing so now. And these aren't necessarily people out of work. In fact, the majority of claimants are now classified as working poor. And although this was a growing problem before COVID, it's a truly significant issue now. The Institute of Fiscal Studies reports that 1/5 of working households, 1/5 of working households in the UK are living in poverty. That, to me, that is just an astronomical figure. Poverty, as we know, has got a hand in hunger, in homelessness, transport poverty, general underachievement, physical and mental health problems. We know that, unsurprisingly, you die earlier if you live in poverty. And the vast majority of those working households are families with children, and most of them have at least one member of the household who is classified as disabled. So there's a disproportionate representation there. Some of these families live in our town. They're working in poorly paid and insecure jobs. Many are on 0 hours contracts at minimum wage. Withdrawing the £20 payment will be the final straw. It really will for many of them. As a council, we recognise that food poverty exists in Rugby, and I'm talking with officers at the moment about some options that will support residents and families in very difficult circumstances. Our council staff, as we've mentioned tonight, really stepped up to run the food bank at the start of the first lockdown. And there are many people in the council who give their time and their efforts to third sector too. And we have to follow all of that work up with a really strong public statement and action that shows people on the edge of poverty in Rugby that we see them. We will do our best for them, and we'll add our voice to those of other local authorities and councils who are taking their evidence to government as well. We must keep that lifeline. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers on this? No hands raised. Seconder, would you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm delighted to second the motion and ask the chamber to support the motion to retain the £20 a week universal credit for the COVID top-up to be extended permanently. Failure to extend the payment would help trigger a spike in poverty not seen since the 1980s. A steady income in the form of regular weekly uplift is the best way to support the low-income households with the extra pandemic costs, because so little certainty exists about when the economy might recover from the crisis. Mr. Mayor, removing the increase now, while the impact of the pandemic is still being keenly felt, would plunge hundreds of thousands of households, including children, into poverty. And for the millions already living in poverty, it would be drag them down into destitution. Mr. Mayor, removing the extra payment in April would represent a failure. Failure to recognize the reality of people struggling without regular support. Hundreds of thousands of families will be swept into poverty. And Mr. Mayor, the government must end the uncertainty and commit to extend this lifeline. The pandemic's impact on the economy and livelihood will sadly be with us for a long time. Removing the COVID boost would help trigger the biggest year-on-year rise in poverty rate since the 1980s. Removing the £20 uplift would mean a further 1.2 million people will fall into relative poverty, and 400,000 of whom are children. Mr. Mayor, the least well-off families will be hardest hit by the withdrawal of the £20 boost. About 60% of the UK single parents family will lose out. The north of England, Wales, Midlands, Northern Ireland will be worst hit area. Mr. Mayor, I second the motion and ask that the Rugby Borough Council write to central government that the £20 weekly boost to the universal credit payment be retained. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised, so I assume there are no other speakers. And I'll move to the vote. Will those in favour please show using the raise hands function?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I did actually have my hand up.
Oh, I wasn't, sorry, it wasn't showing on my screen.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we'll bring Councillor Ellis in, if that's okay.
Yeah. Could you all lower your hands then, please, for the moment, so we have no confusion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Manny, for that. I appreciate it. All I wanted to say on top of everything that Councillor Mistry and Councillor Brown said was, you know, this isn't necessarily coming from the Labour Party. This is a cross-party position taken by a group of MPs in Parliament. So it doesn't have to be a party situation. And also the situation regarding the £20 a week is also backed by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, is a renowned research body who look very specifically at the poverty indicators in our communities. And we know that this is going to clobber the poorest workers and those battling families at the edge right now, because we're seeing the jobs go. So all I really wanted to do was just point to the JRF as an independent body and say to the Conservatives opposite, please do lobby your own party and try to get this established. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rourke, you have your hand up. Do you wish to speak?
No, sorry.
All right, okay. Final ask, are there any other speakers before I go to the vote? All right, thank you. With those in favour, please show using the raised hand function.
That's 21 for the motion, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, 22.
Thank you. Would you please all lower your hands? Those against, please show using the raised hand function.
That's 12 against, Mr. Mayor.
12. Okay, will you please lower your hands? Okay, with those wishing to abstain, please show using the raised hand function.
That's 1 abstention, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Well, in that case, the motion is carried. We move on to the next item, which is 8B. In accordance with the Council's standing orders, I consider that the next motion as set out in item 8B of the agenda should be referred to Scrutiny Committee. The proposer and seconder only have the right to speak, and there will be no discussion on the motion. Councillor Ms Robbins, will you please move the motion, notice of which has been given under Standing Order 11?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I so move.
Who will second the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I will gladly second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ms Robbins, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I do not think there are many people left in the world who do not believe that global warming is a reality, or that it is responsible for the increasing turbulent weather that is being experienced around the world. Rugby has seen increased rainfall and flooding in recent months to an extent not experienced in many years. It is inevitable that there will be increased flooding in many areas of the borough, and with the increasing number of houses being built in the borough, it is imperative that we ensure that all new builds are safe from the possibility of flooding. That is why, Mr. Mayor, I am happy to accept the friendly amendment that will be put forward by the Liberal Democrats. It is essential that the possibility of flooding is taken into consideration during the planning process.
I don't believe the amendment can be taken tonight. It would have to go to the Scrutiny Committee.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, but I haven't finished speaking.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I am aware that this issue has been scrutinised before, but I really feel very strongly that since that time, the situation has worsened. Therefore, I feel that we must revisit the flooding situation and ensure that we do everything possible to protect our borough and our residents from flooding in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The motion now stands referred to Scrutiny Committee.
I've got a right to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, yeah, seconder.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm more than happy to second this motion brought by Councillor Robbins. Rugby Borough has in the past few weeks suffered, like many other boroughs across the country, from copious amounts of rain, and from what I understand, we are due for far more. As stated, we have had several storms in and around Rugby, the latest at Tesco's Elliott Field, which has been alluded to, where the car park was flooded. My ward, Wolston and the Lawfords, covers Wolston, Brandon, Bretford, Church Lawford, Long Lawford and Little Lawford, who all suffer from flooding from the River Avon. There were calls for help from these villages, and I have, in my time as a councillor, delivered sandbags to these villages and along the Brookside through Wolston Village. I feel as a borough council, we must be proactive and not reactive with emergencies of this magnitude. I second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The motion now stands referred to Scrutiny Committee. Move on to the next. I consider it advisable and convenient to deal with the motion set out in agenda item 8C at this meeting. Councillor Mrs. Alnack, will you please move the motion set out in item 8C of the agenda, notice of which has been given under Standing Order 11.
I so move.
Who will second the motion?
I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Mrs. Alnack to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I, like many others, have found news of COVID deaths, hospital admissions, etc., extremely depressing. Lockdown after lockdown, and I think everybody has found it very, very difficult. It's had a major negative impact on people's health, wealth and well-being throughout the world, not just in Rugby. And in response, obviously, we've had the rollout of vaccination and testing centres throughout Britain. Rugby has done extremely well. We have delivered more vaccines than any other in Warwickshire, and the feedback from individuals who've had the vaccine has been extremely favourable. They've all commented on the professionalism of the staff and volunteers, the security of the facilities and how well organised everything was. So I'm calling on the council to formally acknowledge the excellent progress our local vaccination centre, Lock House, and the testing centre have made by recording a sincere thank you to all concerned. When so much of the news around COVID-19 is not good, we feel that such positive news should be celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other speakers?
Can I speak, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I completely agree with everything that Councillor Alnack has said. I'm sure we're all extremely grateful to our volunteers and staff that are making sure that all our vulnerable residents are vaccinated against this virus. They're doing an absolutely amazing job, and I'm sure that we would all love to thank them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other hands up to speak? Councillor O'Rourke, have you a hand up?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Councillor O'Rourke, you're on mute. Would you like to start again?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm having a few problems, technical issues. I don't know what's going on. I mean, in principle, I absolutely welcome this notice of motion, and it is fair to say that it's good to have something to celebrate because we are living in very challenging times. But it's always very difficult. I'm always very wary myself that when we start acknowledging the good work that people do, that we might miss out the good work that other people are doing. So absolutely know that the work that's happening at Lockhouse is brilliant. Note the work that's happening at the testing centre that was set up in the Indian Association is absolutely brilliant. But I'd like to say that actually vaccines have been delivered to people with Rugby by community nurses and lots of other different people as well. And I think it's really, really important from a positive point of view, not being negative, that we actually sort of recognise what all those volunteers are doing. You know, I mean, just looking in my own group, I've got Councillor Tom Mahoney that works 3 days a week voluntary at the hospital. There's lots of people doing stuff. I suppose that's the point that I want to make. And it would be good if you could extend the thank you to all those people that are volunteering and helping and doing what they can, you know, to sort of, you know, ensure that we get through COVID as quickly as we can. I mean, even the sort of like the councillors, the stuff that councillors have been doing. I mean, I've got we've got 3 BAME councillors. They're engaging with their community, encouraging people to have the vaccine, making films. So, you know, I'm happy to support it, but I would ask you to consider extending the thanks to all of those people that have been involved, not just at those specific places. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson, you have your hands up. I think you're muted, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I fully support the motion that's been put forward and some of the other comments about what others have done in other places. But as someone who's been shielded for a full year and has hardly been outside the door during the whole of that 12 months, it was with some trepidation I went down to Lockhouse to have my vaccination. But what I found there was extremely well organised. It was clear that a great deal of thought had gone into how people would utilise that centre, how the people would move around the building, and yes, have a rest after that in case they had any ill effects from the jab. So yeah, I think it was very well organised, and so, yeah, I'm quite happy to praise other groups at other times, but I think in line with the motion that we have in front of us, I think Councillor Annette's made a good call tonight.
Thank you. Well, we've got a number of speakers, about 8 of you altogether. Then the next person with a hand up, I think, unless Councillor Rourke wants to speak again.
Thank you.
Is Councillor Deepa Roberts.
I think we have done a great job in Rugby distributing the vaccine, but the whole country is doing it. And as a frontline worker, I can see how this work is doing. But as we are thanking everybody, I think we should extend our thanks to Boris Johnson and his government, who were first in line to secure all these vaccines so that now we can distribute it in Rugby. Thank you.
Okay. The next person in the list is Councillor Jim Ellis.
Thank you. What I wanted to say was also as a frontline worker, thank you to everyone who's volunteered in the community, you know, at a volunteer level as well. It's amazing actually, and it does give you a positive glow actually, cross-party glow maybe. One thing I would like to highlight as a warning to all councillors actually is there is some literature circulating across the town which is anti-vaccination, and I would be very grateful if you do see anything to report it directly to the police. They do know about it, but we've been picking up the leaflets in Ben and Brownsover, so I would be grateful if all of you could keep an eye out for that. It'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Mrs Roberts to remove their hands please. The next person on the list I've got is Councillor Ishmistry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just echo what Councillor Mrs. Eleanor has said. I just came off a meeting earlier and on the CCG one, and it's amazing the numbers of, facts speaks louder than anything. 260,000 people so far in Warwickshire and Coventry have been jabbed. That's really remarkable. And the other thing is that over the 80 age, 95% of the people have been vaccinated, and that's for the vaccination. On regard to the other one, no symptoms testing centre, I've been involved with working closely with Warwickshire County Council officers and who have set it up the facility at the Indian Centre at Edward Street. And I also met the leader of the council as well, while we were setting it up. And quite clearly, it's going through so smoothly. It's probably the best centre, I've been informed by the officers at the county, that has been run. And you're looking at something like 500 to 550 people, some are probably repeat because they go regularly, have been processed per day. So it's a remarkable achievement, I think, for rugby, and the people are really taking it seriously, Mr. Hale, that this COVID is really here to stay for a while. And so we make sure we be mindful. It's not, the vaccination isn't just a success at the moment, because half the population and the young ones that is still going to spread it. So this rapid lateral testing is going to continue, I believe, beyond March, April, May, June. So just be on your guard. It's not all over yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask you all again to, once you've spoken, to lower your hands, unless you wish to speak again. Thank you. The next one I've got on the list is Councillor Kieran Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to lay on record my thanks to all the efforts of the volunteers throughout rugby. As someone who has received their first jab and is due for their second one in 10 weeks' time, the efforts of everyone involved has been absolutely fantastic, from the volunteers to the healthcare workers. We've come such a long way in a year through the hard work of our science and our local administration. We need to power on through. We need to finish the job. I echo Councillor Mistry's sentiments in that, as has been said in America, if this is like the flu, it may never fully go away, but we can get it to a point where it is manageable with vaccines and management. But we are certainly appear to be on the upward curve, and I pay tribute to the efforts of this town. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person I've got is Councillor Ramesh Srivastava.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion. A lot of people have worked very hard, and whole community, we have learned a lot. It's a very difficult situation for all of us throughout the world. But this has shown us how we can work together, especially with the technology. Also, it has shown us how our action affect the environment. So a lot of volunteers have worked, and I support the proposal by Councillor Maggie Oak that it should be extended to the other people, to the whole people of the community in rugby, and we should celebrate it as a community. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ian Picker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting the motion this evening, and I just wanted to say something about the specific motion before us this evening, because of course, when the vaccine started to get rolled out late last year, early this year, the government, of course, set a very ambitious target for getting the 1 to 4 priority groups done by the 15th of February. Well, rugby didn't just manage to do that, it hit that over a week before the government deadline. So I think I haven't had the personal experience of going down there, and I hope not to have to go down there for a reasonable length of time, as there are many people who need the vaccine far more than I do. But the achievement of getting that site set up and the over 100 volunteers that have come forward to help with it, I think does deserve this council's praise, and has already been praised in Parliament by the Health Secretary.
Thank you. Councillor Jim Shearer.
Mr. Mayor. Hello.
Hello, yes.
First of all, can I congratulate all the parties and the leadership, the way they have conducted the meeting tonight, very, very ably and really passionately showing the support for the people who suffer due to this crisis. And secondly, I think there are still many people, maybe few in Rugby, but other part of Warwickshire, from the ethnic minority groups, who are a bit reluctant or led to believe that this vaccination is going to be detrimental to them religiously or otherwise, and they're spreading wrong propaganda. And we appeal to the people of Rugby, especially the ethnic minority communities, to just ignore it, to go and have the vaccination done, because that is the only way we could beat this virus. And secondly, I think when this is going to be soon over, by maybe June, we should set a date where all communities, all members of the society, civic and other, should celebrate and have really a day to mark how we get rid of that, and also remember those who lost their lives and those who actually volunteered to support throughout the crisis, and celebrate that. And this is a remarkable way of showing oneness with the community, and all sections of the community are working with the council. And I really, 40 years on the council, I never saw such a council expressing concern and unanimously together to beat this virus. And thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope we'll carry on putting the people of Rugby first than anything of our political or other view.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer.
Jim.
I obviously I would always also support this motion, and I did have already made it clear that I was grateful to the volunteers and so on at the last council meeting we had, and also in an article that's on the council website. So I don't think I've got any more speakers on showing they wish to speak at the moment. So Councillor Anlock, do you wish to come back and make any further remarks?
No, thank you.
Okay, in that case, I shall now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour, please show using the raise hand function.
That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. In which case, we'll move on to the next item. Oh, sorry, I'll declare the motion is carried in that case. And then move on to the next item, which is correspondence. Is there any correspondence, Executive Director?
There is none, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 10. I move that the common seal be affixed to the various orders, deed and documents referred to in item 6 and 7 of the agenda paper. Who will second the motion?
I will, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Those in favour, please show using the raise hand function.
That's 36 for Mr. Mayor.
36. Oh, please lower your hands. Still got some hands that haven't been lowered. Okay, thank you. Those against, please show using the raise hand function.
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
In that case, do we have any wish to abstain?
There are no abstentions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I declare the motion is carried. We move on to item 11, motion to exclude the public under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972. Under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of information defined in the paragraph 1, schedule 12A of the Act. I so move. Who will second the motion?
I will, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Those in favour, please show using the raise hand function.
That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Good, thank you very much. In which case the motion is carried. That concludes the public part of the meeting. Could I ask IT support if they would stop the live streaming and confirm back to me when that streaming is ended? Thank you very much. Of January 2000.